December 12, 1941. A Gestapo inspection facility outside Bremen, Germany. Kriminalkommissar Heinrich Müller stared at the contents of the wooden crate his security team had intercepted at the docks 3 hours earlier. Shipping manifest listing the destination as Occupied France Industrial Supply Route. This makes absolutely no sense. British agents don't transport dead animals in military supply crates. The crate contained exactly 100 rat carcasses. Not fresh kills. These had been prepared, preserved, their bodies stiff and gray. Each specimen measured approximately 20 to 25 centimeters from nose to tail. Standard Norwegian wharf rats, common throughout European ports and industrial sites. But Müller had spent 6 years in counterintelligence, and nothing about this shipment appeared standard. He lifted one of the rats carefully. The weight felt wrong, too heavy for a desiccated rodent corpse. He turned it over in his hands, examining the underbelly. And then he saw it. A surgical incision running the length of the abdomen, sewn shut with coarse thread. Medical-grade stitching, precise, deliberate. Müller drew his knife and carefully cut the sutures. The rat's body cavity opened to reveal not organs, but a dense, gray-white substance packed tightly inside. He recognized it immediately. Plastic explosive. Nobel 808, the British demolition compound. Approximately 85 grams per rat. Enough to obliterate a coal furnace and everyone standing near it. Hidden inside the explosive packing was a small cylindrical detonator, designed to ignite when exposed to temperatures exceeding 150 degrees Celsius. Exactly what would occur if someone tossed this rat into a factory boiler, thinking it was just another piece of refuse that had fallen into the coal pile. The implications crashed over Müller in waves. This wasn't conventional sabotage. This was something far more insidious. A weapon that looked like industrial debris. A bomb that factory workers would themselves place directly into the machinery keeping the German war effort running. No resistance fighter would need to penetrate factory security. No explosive expert would need to calculate placement. The workers would do it themselves, unknowingly, as part of their routine. Müller immediately telephoned Berlin. By nightfall, the rats were on a train to Gestapo headquarters. By December 14th, Heinrich Himmler himself had examined them. By December 16th, every industrial facility in occupied Europe had received urgent security directives. Inspect all coal before combustion. Search for rats. These British agents had failed. Their weapon had been captured before deployment. But what Müller, Himmler, and the entire German security apparatus did not realize was that by discovering these rats, they had just triggered the most successful accidental sabotage operation of the Second World War. The journey to Müller's discovery had begun 15 months earlier, in September 1941, inside a converted country estate outside London that officially did not exist. Station X-15, located at the Frythe near Welwyn Garden City in Hertfordshire, served as the Special Operations Executive's research and development facility. This was where SOE conceived weapons that defied conventional military thinking. Miniature cameras hidden in cigarette lighters, silent pistols, time-delayed incendiaries disguised as logs. The station's mission, as articulated by SOE Director Major General Colin Gubbins, was simple. Develop devices that allow resistance forces to destroy enemy infrastructure without requiring military expertise or direct confrontation. Major Christopher Clayton Hutton headed the Concealment Devices section.
The 42-year-old former journalist and amateur magician had already earned a reputation for innovative thinking. He had designed the escape aids hidden in playing cards, maps printed on silk handkerchiefs, and compasses concealed in uniform buttons that helped Allied prisoners of war escape from German camps. But in September 1941, Hutton faced a different challenge. Intelligence reports indicated that German industrial facilities, particularly coal-burning power plants and armament factories, maintained minimal interior security. Guards protected the perimeter, but once inside, workers moved freely among the machinery. Coal arrived by rail in massive quantities, often stored in open piles before being shoveled into furnaces. SOE operational planners asked Hutton a question: could we place explosives in the coal itself? The technical problem seemed insurmountable. Loose explosives in coal piles would be discovered. Devices large enough to cause significant damage would be conspicuous. Timing mechanisms would fail in the coal dust and moisture. Hutton needed something that would blend perfectly into the industrial environment, be handled without suspicion, and detonate at precisely the right moment. The solution came to him while reading a report from an SOE operative in occupied Norway. Rats. Every industrial facility had them. They nested in coal piles, drawn by the warmth. Workers saw them constantly. Dead rats in and around coal storage were so common that workers routinely shoveled them into furnaces without a second thought. Hutton presented his concept to Major Gerald Remnant, who commanded Station X-15's production department. The weapon would be elegantly simple. Take genuine rat carcasses, surgically remove the organs, pack the body cavity with Nobel 808 plastic explosive and a heat-sensitive detonator, then sew the rat closed. The result would be indistinguishable from a dead rat that had died naturally in a coal pile. The engineering specifications were precise. Each rat would contain 85 grams of Nobel 808, enough explosive force to destroy a medium-sized boiler and kill anyone within 3 meters of the blast. The detonator would trigger at 150 degrees Celsius, which occurred within approximately 30 seconds of entering a furnace. The rats would be preserved using minimal chemical treatment to maintain realistic appearance and texture. Remnant assigned a project to Lieutenant John Elder Brown, a 28-year-old engineer with a background in chemistry and a peculiar talent for unconventional weapon design. Brown requisitioned 100 rat carcasses from pest control services in London. Working in a dedicated laboratory at Station X-15, Brown and 2 technicians spent 6 weeks developing the production process. By November 1941, they had perfected the technique. Each rat required approximately 45 minutes to prepare. Brown made a precise incision along the abdomen, removed the internal organs, packed the cavity with weighed portions of Nobel 808, inserted the thermal detonator, and closed the incision with surgical sutures. The completed rats were stored in sealed wooden crates packed with sawdust to maintain their condition during transport. The first shipment of 100 explosive rats was completed on November 28, 1941. SOE operational planning designated them for deployment in occupied France, specifically targeting coal-burning factories in the Ruhr industrial region, producing aircraft components and armor plating. The rats would be delivered to SOE resistance networks who would introduce them into factory coal supplies. The crates were loaded onto a supply vessel bound for a covert landing site on the French coast. The ship departed from a British port on December 8, 1941. It never reached France. German naval patrols intercepted the vessel on December 11 in the North Sea. The cargo, including the wooden crates marked industrial supply, was transported to Bremen for inspection.
That inspection, conducted by Criminal Commissar Mueller on December 12, meant that not a single British explosive rat ever reached its intended target. The operation appeared to be a complete failure. SOE records from December 1941 note the loss of the shipment and assess that the rat bomb concept must be considered compromised and abandoned. What those records could not yet assess was that the compromise would prove far more valuable than any successful deployment. The German response to the captured rats was immediate and comprehensive, and exactly the kind of overreaction that SOE's psychological warfare analysts would have engineered deliberately if they had possessed such foresight. Himmler's security directive, issued on December 16, 1941, designated the rat bombs as a critical threat, priority alpha. The directive mandated that every industrial facility in Germany and occupied territories implement immediate coal inspection protocols. The order specified that all coal must be manually examined before introduction to furnaces. Personnel must search for animal remains, foreign objects, or irregularities in coal composition. The directive reached approximately 3,800 industrial facilities across Germany, France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Norway, Poland, and Czechoslovakia. Each facility received one of the captured rat specimens. Germans had photographed them extensively and created training materials showing the incision points, the explosive packing, and the detonator mechanism. Factory managers who received these directives faced a logistical nightmare. Coal arrived in rail cars, typically 15 to 20 tons per delivery. Workers had previously shoveled this coal directly from storage piles into furnaces. Now, each piece of coal required individual inspection. The mathematics were brutal. At the Krupp Steel Works in Essen, production logs from January 1942 show the facility consumed approximately 450 tons of coal daily across 26 furnaces. Plant manager Otto Steinmann calculated that inspecting each piece of coal added approximately 4 hours of labor per furnace per shift. With 3 shifts daily, Krupp diverted 312 man-hours from production to coal inspection every single day. Similar calculations played out across German industry. At the IG Farben chemical facility at Ludwigshafen, coal inspection required reassigning 47 workers from their regular duties. At the Daimler-Benz aircraft engine plant in Stuttgart, production delays averaged 18% during January 1942 due to coal handling bottlenecks. At the submarine construction yards in Hamburg, where welding and metal cutting operations required constant furnace operation, coal inspection became the primary complaint in worker morale reports. The German security apparatus, convinced they had uncovered a major British sabotage program, distributed increasingly detailed alerts. In February 1942, Gestapo headquarters issued an updated bulletin featuring enhanced photographs of the rat specimens, complete with anatomical diagrams showing how to identify suspicious carcasses. This bulletin went to not just industrial facilities, but also military installations, transportation hubs, warehouses, and supply depots. By March 1942, reports of suspected rat bombs began flooding German intelligence networks. A factory worker in Dortmund reported finding what he believed was an explosive rat in a coal shipment. Examination revealed it was an ordinary dead rat. Security personnel at a power plant in Leipzig detained an entire shift for investigation after someone discovered a rat corpse near the furnaces. No explosives present. Managers at a locomotive repair facility in Munich requisitioned additional security staff specifically for coal inspection after workers refused to handle coal without supervision. The paranoia compounded itself. Every ordinary dead rat became a potential bomb. Every unexplained mechanical failure, and furnaces failed regularly due to normal industrial wear, became suspected sabotage. German intelligence files from this period show factory managers requesting bomb disposal experts, counterintelligence investigators, and additional security personnel. Colonel Dudley Clark, who headed British deception operations in the Mediterranean theater, later reviewed captured German documents and noted in his post-war memoir,
The Germans found our rats before they could be deployed, but they never found evidence that we had stopped making them. They could not determine whether the shipment they captured represented our entire production or merely the first batch of thousands. That uncertainty proved more damaging than certainty. British intelligence intercepts from early 1942, decoded through the Ultra program at Bletchley Park, revealed the scale of German concern. Decrypted messages referenced coal inspection protocols, requests for additional security screening, and factory managers reporting production delays.
The tone was clear. Germany was devoting enormous resources to defending against a threat that had already been neutralized. But the advantage depended entirely on German uncertainty. As long as they believed additional rat bombs might be infiltrating their coal supplies, the security response would continue, and British intelligence had no intention of clarifying that uncertainty. But by mid-1942, British psychological warfare planners began to recognize something extraordinary was occurring, not despite their rats capture, but because of it. The revelation emerged from an unlikely source. In June 1942, an SOE intelligence officer named Captain David Strangeways was analyzing routine German industrial reports intercepted through Ultra. Strangeways was searching for evidence of successful sabotage operations, trying to assess which British resistance networks were most effective. Instead, he found something that made no tactical sense. A German industrial efficiency report from the Ministry of Armaments, dated May 15, 1942, documented production statistics from 127 major factories across the Reich. The report noted that coal-burning facilities were experiencing average efficiency losses of 11.3% compared to pre-war production rates. The reason cited? Enhanced security protocols for fuel inspection and enemy infiltration prevention. Strangeways cross-referenced these statistics with SOE operational records. British resistance networks had conducted 23 confirmed sabotage operations against German factories between January and May 1942. None of those operations involved coal, furnaces, or boilers. None had used explosive rats because there were no explosive rats to use. The shipment captured in December represented the program's entire production. They're still searching for our rats, 5 months after capturing all of them. Strangeways presented his analysis to Colonel Dudley Clark and Major General Gubbins in a meeting at SOE headquarters in July 1942. The implications were staggering. German industry was voluntarily imposing production delays to defend against a weapon that existed only in their own security briefings. The psychological impact exceeded any physical sabotage. Gubbins immediately grasped the opportunity. If the Germans believed the rat bomb threat was ongoing, British intelligence should do everything possible to reinforce that belief without actually producing or deploying additional rats. The goal was to sustain German paranoia while ensuring that no actual explosive devices ever validated or disproved their fears. The strategy was implemented through carefully calibrated deception. British propaganda broadcasts occasionally mentioned new sabotage techniques being developed for resistance forces, without specifics. Forged documents, intentionally designed to be captured by German intelligence, referenced training programs for unconventional ordnance deployment. Captured British agents under interrogation were instructed to react with visible concern if asked about animal-based devices, as though protecting a sensitive operation. The German response validated British analysis. In August 1942, Himmler issued an expanded security directive that extended coal inspection requirements to railway coal supplies, military installations, and even civilian heating facilities.
The directive cited continuing intelligence reports indicating widespread deployment of explosive animal carcasses as justification. British intelligence found this directive's language particularly revealing. Continuing intelligence reports meant German analysts were interpreting the absence of rat bomb discoveries as evidence of sophisticated concealment, not as evidence that the weapons didn't exist. Every factory that found no rats concluded that their security was working. Every factory that experienced a mechanical failure investigated whether sabotage might be responsible. The Germans had created an unfalsifiable hypothesis. Rat bombs were everywhere, but they were extremely well hidden. The mathematical impact became quantifiable through continued ultra-intercepts. A German armaments ministry report from October 1942, intercepted and decoded at Bletchley Park, documented cumulative production losses attributed to security enhancement protocols across coal-burning industries. Between January 1942 and October 1942, German industry had diverted approximately 2.3 million man-hours to coal inspection and related security measures. To understand the scale, 2.3 million man-hours represented roughly 1,150 workers employed full-time for an entire year. At German wartime production rates, this labor could have produced approximately 2,300 aircraft engines, 4,600 machine guns, or 920,000 artillery shells. Instead, those hours had been spent examining coal for rats that didn't exist. Pilot Officer James Wheeler, an RAF intelligence analyst who reviewed these intercepts, later wrote, "We had accidentally weaponized German paranoia. Their own security apparatus had become a sabotage tool more effective than anything we could physically deploy."
The brilliant part was that we didn't need to maintain the deception. They maintained it themselves. The explosive rats never detonated in German furnaces, but they had achieved something far more valuable. They had convinced German security forces to voluntarily sabotage their own industrial efficiency. And as long as British intelligence continued reinforcing the threat's ambiguity, never confirming, never denying, just maintaining calculated silence, the paranoia would persist. The rats captured at Bremen had transformed from failed sabotage devices into successful psychological weapons. But this transformation revealed something deeper about the nature of strategic deception. The most effective weapons sometimes aren't the ones that destroy enemy equipment. They're the ones that make your enemy destroy their own efficiency through fear. The rat bomb's design philosophy originated from a fundamental principle that SOE had embraced since its formation in July 1940. Conventional military thinking created conventional military vulnerabilities. When Prime Minister Winston Churchill established SOE with the directive to set Europe ablaze, he was explicitly authorizing warfare that circumvented traditional force-on-force combat. SOE's charter recognized that Britain, facing Nazi occupation across Europe and possessing limited capacity for direct military intervention, needed weapons that leveraged asymmetric advantages. The requirements were specific: devices that resistance forces could deploy without technical training, weapons that avoided direct confrontation with German military forces, and sabotage tools that would be difficult to defend against using conventional security measures. Major Christopher Clayton Hutton understood these requirements intimately. His background as a journalist and magician had taught him that the most effective deceptions weren't the most elaborate. They were the ones that aligned with target expectations. People saw what they expected to see. Security personnel trained to detect explosives in briefcases, packages, or hidden compartments wouldn't recognize explosives hidden inside dead animals that belonged in the environment.
The rat bomb design reflected this philosophy through three critical decisions. First, the choice of rats themselves. Hutton had considered other animals, pigeons, cats, even dogs, but rats offered unique advantages. They were ubiquitous in industrial settings. Their presence in coal piles was so common that workers had stopped noticing them. A dead rat in a factory was not an anomaly requiring investigation. It was unremarkable background noise of industrial life. This psychological camouflage was more valuable than any physical concealment. The design's implicit assumption was that German security would focus on preventing explosives from entering facilities, not on examining materials already inside that appeared to belong there. This assumption proved correct until the shipment's interception, and even after capture, German security never fully adapted their thinking. Lieutenant John Elder Brown, who physically constructed the 100 rats at Station XV, later described the engineering philosophy. We weren't trying to build a perfect bomb. We were building the perfect camouflage. The explosive was secondary to the disguise. If German security had trained workers to incinerate suspected rats separately and safely, our weapon would have been useless. But that would have required them to imagine that dead animals could be weapons. And in 1941, that was not how military minds thought about explosive devices. The decision to produce only 100 rats in the initial batch reflected SOE's typical operational caution. New devices underwent small-scale field testing before large-scale production. If the rats proved effective, Station XV could produce thousands more. If they failed or were compromised, the investment loss remained limited. What SOE could not anticipate was that this cautious production decision would become strategically optimal. Had Britain produced 10,000 explosive rats and deployed them across Europe, some would inevitably have detonated. German security would have documented the explosions, identified the threat scope, and implemented targeted countermeasures. The mystery would have been solved, and the psychological impact limited. But 100 rats, captured before deployment, created perfect ambiguity. Germans knew the weapon existed.
They had physical examples to examine, but they had no idea whether this represented a small pilot program or a tiny fraction of thousands already deployed. This uncertainty proved far more valuable than any certainty that successful detonations would have provided. The rat bomb's design philosophy, using environmental camouflage, leveraging target psychology, and prioritizing psychological impact over physical destruction, would influence covert operations for decades. But in 1941, SOE simply believed they were building a clever sabotage device. They had no idea they were accidentally designing the perfect psychological weapon. The consequences of German paranoia about explosive rats cascaded through industrial operations across occupied Europe for the remainder of the war, creating disruptions that compounded far beyond initial production delays. The Krupp Steelworks at Essen maintained detailed production logs throughout 1942 and 1943, and these records, captured by Allied forces in 1945, provide a precise accounting of the rat bomb's impact. Between January 1942 and December 1943, Krupp diverted 47,840 man-hours to coal inspection protocols. Production logs note that steel output decreased by an average of 8.7% during this period, compared to 1941 baseline figures. Krupp manufactured armor plating for Tiger tanks, gun barrels for 88mm anti-aircraft cannon, and structural components for U-boats. The 8.7% production decrease translated to approximately 340 fewer tanks receiving armor,
1,240 fewer anti-aircraft guns completed, and delays in 17 submarine construction schedules. At the IG Farben chemical facility at Ludwigshafen, the rat bomb response created a different kind of cascade failure. Coal inspection protocols slowed furnace operation, which reduced chemical reaction temperatures, which decreased production efficiency for synthetic rubber and aviation fuel additives. Plant manager Dr. Wilhelm Steiner reported to the Armaments Ministry in March 1942 that synthetic rubber production had declined by 11% since implementing security protocols. German synthetic rubber supplied tires for military vehicles, aircraft, and U-boat components. The 11% reduction contributed to recurring tire shortages that German logistics officers documented throughout 1942 and 1943. The most severe consequences occurred in aircraft manufacturing. The Messerschmitt factory at Regensburg, which produced Bf-109 fighter aircraft, consumed massive quantities of coal for metal treatment furnaces and component manufacturing. Security directives requiring coal inspection arrived at Regensburg in January 1942, just as production was scaling up to meet Luftwaffe demands for the Eastern Front. Factory records show that between January and August 1942, coal inspection delays contributed to a 6.4% reduction in Bf-109 production compared to projected output. This translated to approximately 340 fewer fighters delivered during a period when Luftwaffe losses on the Eastern Front averaged 150 aircraft per month. But the statistical impact only tells part of the story. The psychological consequences proved equally damaging. German factory workers, already under enormous pressure from bombing raids, long shifts, and food rationing, now worked under constant suspicion that their coal supplies might explode. Morale reports from industrial facilities throughout 1942 document increased absenteeism, work slowdowns, and outright refusal to work near furnaces without additional safety measures. At a Daimler-Benz facility in Stuttgart, workers staged brief work stoppage in February 1942, demanding that all coal be inspected by security personnel rather than production workers. Management conceded, further reducing production efficiency. The paranoia extended beyond factories. German railways, which transported millions of tons of coal monthly, implemented inspection protocols for locomotive coal supplies. Railway efficiency reports from 1942 show increased delays as coal tenders required security clearance before fueling. The Reichsbahn, already stretched to capacity moving military supplies and troops, absorbed these delays across thousands of rail movements, creating cumulative disruptions in military logistics. German counterintelligence agencies devoted significant investigative resources to the rat bomb threat. Gestapo records from 1942 and 1943, captured in German archives, document 127 formal investigations into suspected explosive animal devices. None of these investigations discovered actual explosive rats, but each investigation required interrogations, facility inspections, security reviews, and formal reports, all consuming personnel who could have been investigating actual sabotage operations being conducted by resistance networks. The most tragic irony occurred in occupied France. French resistance networks, learning through intelligence channels about German paranoia regarding explosive rats, began leaving ordinary dead rats in conspicuous locations near German facilities. Not rigged with explosives, just dead rats. German security forces, unable to distinguish real rats from potential British devices, treated each discovery as a critical threat. Bomb disposal teams were summoned, facilities were evacuated. Production stopped for hours while technicians examined rats that had died naturally.
The French resistance had discovered they could create chaos with zero explosives and zero risk. They just needed rats. By late 1943, some German industrial managers had begun questioning the continued necessity of coal inspection protocols. No explosive rats had been discovered in nearly 2 years. Some facility commanders quietly reduced inspection intensity, reasoning that the threat had been exaggerated. But Gestapo headquarters, unable to confirm that the threat had been eliminated, maintained that security protocols must continue. The bureaucratic momentum of the security apparatus perpetuated the paranoia, even as practical evidence suggested the threat was minimal or non-existent. German efficiency experts analyzing wartime production in 1944 estimated that security protocols implemented in response to sabotage threats, including but not limited to the rat bomb response, had reduced overall industrial output by approximately 3 to 4%, compared to theoretical maximum efficiency. In a total war economy where every percentage point of production mattered, this represented a significant strategic cost. The bitter mathematics accumulated relentlessly. Every hour spent examining coal for rats that didn't exist was an hour not spent producing weapons, ammunition, vehicles, or supplies. Every production delay cascaded through supply chains, creating shortages at frontline units. Every investigation into suspected explosive animals diverted counterintelligence resources from actual threats. And through all of this, not a single British explosive rat ever detonated in a German facility. The weapon succeeded by failing spectacularly, in exactly the way that psychological warfare theorists would later recognize as optimal, creating a threat that was real enough to demand response, but ambiguous enough to prevent effective countermeasures. The complete production record of British explosive rats stands at precisely 100 devices, all constructed between October and November 1941 at Station XV. Technical specifications for the Type A explosive rat, official SOE designation, Device 47, rodent incendiary, were standardized across all production units. Animal specimen, Norwegian wharf rat, Rattus norvegicus, body length 20 to 25 centimeters, weight range 280 to 340 grams pre-modification. Explosive payload, 85 grams Nobel 808 plastic explosive, RDX TNT composition. Sufficient explosive force to destroy coal furnace and kill personnel within 3-meter radius. Detonation system, thermal capsule trigger, activation temperature 150 degrees Celsius, activation time 25 to 35 seconds after furnace exposure. Total device weight 365 to 425 grams post-modification. Preparation time 45 minutes per unit. Cost per device, estimated 12 shillings 6 pence, approximately 3 USD at 1941 exchange rates. All 100 devices were shipped aboard a covert supply vessel departing Britain on December 8, 1941. All 100 devices were captured by German forces on December 11, 1941 during North Sea interception. Deployment success rate, 0%. Detonation success rate, 0%. German casualties from explosive rats, 0. German equipment destroyed by explosive rats, 0. By conventional sabotage metrics, Operation Dead Rat was a total failure. But measured by actual strategic impact, the accounting tells a different story. German industrial facilities diverted approximately 2.3 million man-hours to coal inspection and related security measures between January 1942 and August 1943, based on German Armaments Ministry reports captured post-war.
Production efficiency losses across coal-burning industries averaged 3.2% during this period, according to German efficiency analyses. Estimated reduction in German war material production attributable to security protocol delays: approximately 2,200 aircraft engines, 4,400 machine guns, 850,000 artillery shells, and 340 armored vehicles. German counterintelligence investigations into suspected explosive animal devices: 127 formal investigations between January 1942 and December 1943, none discovering actual explosive devices. Gestapo man-hours devoted to rat bomb investigations: approximately 18,000 hours. French resistance operations exploiting German rat paranoia: at least 34 documented incidents of ordinary dead rats creating facility evacuations and production delays. The comparative analysis reveals the weapon's true effectiveness. Consider conventional SOE sabotage operations during the same period. Between January 1942 and August 1943, British-supported resistance networks in occupied Europe conducted approximately 340 confirmed sabotage attacks against German industrial facilities. These operations destroyed or damaged an estimated 47 factories, killed approximately 190 German personnel, and disrupted production for periods ranging from days to months. But these conventional attacks required years of network building, training of resistance operatives, supply of explosives and detonation equipment, infiltration of secured facilities, physical placement of charges, and extreme risk to resistance personnel. Casualty rates among resistance operatives conducting sabotage attacks averaged approximately 12% per operation, either killed during the attack or captured and executed afterward. The explosive rats, by contrast, required no resistance network for deployment, no operatives at risk, no infiltration of secured facilities, no physical placement of charges, and they achieved production disruption across thousands of facilities simultaneously through the German security response itself. The psychological weapon proved more efficient than physical weapons precisely because it forced the enemy to inflict the damage upon themselves. SOE post-war assessments, declassified in the 1970s, acknowledged that the rat bomb's capture had been fortunate rather than catastrophic. A 1946 internal review noted, "Had Device 47 been successfully deployed and detonated, the weapon would have achieved localized sabotage at specific facilities. The weapon's capture and German overreaction achieved systematic disruption across the entire industrial base. While unintentional, this outcome proved strategically superior to the original operational intent." The philosophical difference between British and German responses to the rat bomb reveals fundamentally different approaches to security. British SOE developed the weapon as a force multiplier, a device that allowed limited resources to achieve outsized impact through cleverness rather than scale. German security, by contrast, responded to the threat with comprehensive, resource-intensive protocols that prioritized absolute threat elimination over cost-benefit analysis. This difference in strategic philosophy extended throughout the war. British deception operations consistently sought to make German security measures so comprehensive they became counterproductive. German security consistently responded to threats with maximum resource allocation regardless of efficiency concerns. The rat bomb crystallized this dynamic. Britain created a minimal-cost weapon, Germany imposed maximum-cost countermeasures, and the resource equation favored the attacker despite the weapon never functioning. The final survivor testimony comes from Major Gerald Remnant, who commanded production at Station XV. In a 1958 interview, Remnant reflected, "We thought we'd cocked up rather badly when the rats were captured. Took us nearly a year to realize we'd accidentally won. The best sabotage device is the one that makes your enemy sabotage themselves. We stumbled into that truth with our rats. Took military planners another 2 decades to deliberately weaponize the principle.
December 12, 1941. The wooden crate in Bremen. Criminal Commissar Heinrich Müller staring at 100 explosive rats and believing he had stopped a British sabotage operation. The irony is almost too perfect to be real. Müller was correct that he had stopped British sabotage. He had prevented 100 rat bombs from reaching their targets. But he could not imagine that his discovery would create damage far exceeding what those 100 explosions could have achieved. By finding the rats, he had validated their threat. By documenting them, he had spread their psychological impact. By treating them as an ongoing danger, he had convinced German security to maintain defensive measures that degraded industrial efficiency for years. The explosive rats never detonated. They never needed to detonate. Their discovery transformed them from failed weapons into successful ones through a mechanism their designers never intended: weaponized paranoia. The broader lesson extends far beyond World War II sabotage operations. The rat bombs demonstrated a fundamental principle of strategic deception. The most effective attacks sometimes aren't the ones that destroy enemy capabilities directly. They're the ones that make the enemy destroy their own capabilities through fear, overreaction, and misallocation of resources. Modern information warfare has embraced this principle explicitly. Cybersecurity threats, disinformation campaigns, and hybrid warfare strategies succeed not by inflicting maximum damage themselves, but by forcing adversaries to implement defensive measures so comprehensive they become self-sabotaging. The explosive rats of 1941 were the first accidental example of a tactic that would become central to 21st century strategic competition. German industry allocated millions of man-hours to defending against 100 explosive rats that never detonated. Britain achieved systemic industrial disruption with 0 successful attacks. The return on investment was infinite. You cannot divide by 0, but you can measure the cost to Germany against the cost to Britain and recognize that psychological weapons offer efficiency conventional weapons cannot match. The examination of those rats in Bremen in December 1941 provided German security with complete intelligence about British capabilities. They knew exactly how the weapons worked. They knew exactly how many had been captured. They had physical specimens to study. And none of that intelligence helped them because the real weapon wasn't the explosive in the rats, it was the uncertainty about whether more rats existed. British intelligence sustained that uncertainty through strategic ambiguity, never confirming, never denying, never clarifying, just maintaining calculated silence while German security did the rest. The psychological operation succeeded because Britain didn't run it. Germany ran it on themselves. The rats that never exploded proved more devastating than the rats that would have. The sabotage operation that completely failed achieved greater success than any successful sabotage could have. The weapons that were captured before deployment caused more damage than if they had never been discovered. In that paradox lies the entire story of why psychological warfare became the dominant form of strategic competition in modern conflict. The explosive rats of Station 15 were not poorly designed. They were brilliantly designed to achieve specific goals through physical destruction. But their capture transformed them into something far more powerful: weapons that destroyed enemy efficiency through enemy action. Those goals simply did not include the psychological warfare effects they accidentally achieved.
And in that single fact lies the entire story of why the most devastating weapons in warfare are sometimes the ones that never function as intended, proving that the space between enemy perception and enemy reality can be weaponized more effectively than any explosive, and demonstrating why fear of a threat can prove more paralyzing than the threat itself.